Today on the TMZ Podcast.
Welcome to the TMZ Podcast. Derek and Jason here.
Derek, Kim Kardashian getting sued yet again over the SKIMS line. This is the third or fourth story that we've covered over the last year and a half. What happened here? What happened this time?
Yeah, so this one's interesting. So SKIMS, obviously hugely successful company, as you alluded to. You start to become a target of litigation, whether meritorious or not. Some of them may be meritorious, some may not, but you are definitely a big target when you're a successful company. This lawsuit's interesting. So a woman is suing over body tape. You know what body tape is?
Yeah, sure. I've seen the videos.
Yeah, it's when you wear... It's a good search. It's a good search on YouTube. Anyway, it's I know what you mean. So if you sort of wear form-fitting stuff, you'll sometimes put body tape over some of your privates, so that the garment holds.
It also holds the boobs up. That's a big thing.
Holds
the boobs up to give cleavage.
Oh, you and I talking about the uses of body tape is a new low. But
again,
anyway,
I've seen the videos.
The woman says she bought this body tape and it was called SKIMS, and she says you need to test this stuff because it's directly applied to your skin, and like a Band-Aid, it can hurt your skin when you rip it off. And these are very sensitive parts of the body that you put body tape on, your nipples and so forth. And she says she got injured because it ripped off her skin. She said this stuff is subjected to rigorous testing before you release it to the market, and this obviously didn't pass because it harmed me. Now, Kim's reaction to the lawsuit is actually pretty brilliant because I've seen this before. She says this woman bought something on Amazon called SKIMS. But this is not our product on SKIMS. There are Amazon knockoffs of our product. You bought this from Amazon, but our company didn't make this thing that hurt you. It's obviously some sort of rogue seller. We don't sell through Amazon. You have to buy our SKIMS through our own online retailers. And so, although we're sad you were hurt, she's not saying our product is safe. She's saying you just don't have our product.
It's interesting, though, because we haven't, of all the lawsuits we've heard about Kim Kardashian being involved in, both as a plaintiff and as defendant, we have not heard her going after these counterfeiters very often. So we've got these products called SKIMS that are being sold online. I got to think she's unaware of it. Why is she not made an effort to go after these people? And could the woman potentially, I don't think she could potentially claim.
Could Kim go after the counterfeiters?
Well, certainly she could do that, but why hasn't she? But could this woman go after, probably.
I think it's like a game of whack-a-mole. I think a lot of the counterfeiters are pretty fly-by-night operations, some of them in Asia and so forth, where they just make quick copies of things and don't obviously apply the same standards as Kim's company. And if you look at the Amazon sort of receipt that she got, the logo's all messed up.
Yeah.
I sort of buy what Kim is saying, that this is just not a SKIMS product, it's a SKIMS knockoff. So what Kim could do legally, and we don't have to go into too much detail over this, is bring in that counterfeiter and say, hey, you belong in this litigation, not me. Good luck finding those people. They're very hard to track down.
You wonder why it is, and I think the real next phase of the lawsuit, and to your point, we don't have to go too deep legally, but the next phase of these kinds of lawsuits are for people to go after Amazon for not being rigorous enough in stopping these sellers, which lead to counterfeit products that can, in fact, do injury. Kim says that her product doesn't harm anybody.
And it's interesting you say that because the woman obviously is suing SKIMS because that's a deep pocket. You don't want to sue the counterfeiter typically because they're hard to track down and not a deep pocket. But Amazon, very deep pocket. Our standards aren't up to snuff.
The deepest pocket in the world.
The deepest, I mean, good luck finding a deeper one than that. So that is an interesting wrinkle to this. We'll see where it goes because this is just Kim's initial response to this lawsuit that was filed yesterday. But this is a complete defense. If Kim wins on this, it's not going to be a battle of experts saying you applied standards. It's just not our product.
Right. So this is the latest in a series of lawsuits that Kim, the KKW brand, the Kim SKIMS brand have been involved in. One was a few weeks ago, I believe, maybe a couple months ago now, that involved an allegation by a woman who opened a SKIMS beauty shop in New York, in either Brooklyn or Bronx. And she said that Kim was aware of the product, aware of the brand. As a matter of fact, contacted the woman. The woman refused to sell it over. There wasn't an agreement put in place, and Kim nevertheless used the brand. That case is still in litigation. There was one from a couple of years ago where the KKW brand, Kim was accused of stealing the KKW brand. You and I were talking before we went live today about there's two possible ways to look at this. Either Kim, being large, is a huge company, has a target on the back, which is undoubtedly true, or Kim Kardashian and her people are sort of scofflaws, and they just sort of thumb their nose at other smaller business people because they really don't care that much, and they know at the end their deeper pockets are going to get them what they want.
Yeah, I think I don't really know.
Both are true.
Yeah, exactly. There may be elements of both, that Kim is large and could just Bigfoot and steamroll the process and say, to hell with them. We'll pay them off later. Let's get big. We love this name, so forth. Or it could be that she's targeted and is not doing anything wrong. I think you're right. Often the truth lies somewhere in the middle, and the thing about the way the news covers this, and to us to a certain extent, is you follow the complaint, but then there's a lot of litigation that goes on, and then you sometimes tell you about the conclusion. But all that stuff in the
conclusion is
middle,
often a settlement that is not made public, so you don't hear about the end. So a lot of what we hear about
are the initial allegations, the initial response, and then the conclusion, which is often no one admits anything wrong. Here's a couple $1,000, and you can't draw any conclusions.
And that may or may not be public at all. The cases may disappear into the firmament, which is what often happens.
Which is why trials are so fascinating when they happen, because they're rare, right?
Yeah.
So the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial, obviously very different circumstances, but people love that because you actually got to see the battle wage out in court.
Yeah.
That's exceptionally rare because of look how many resources
And honestly,
it
a
takes.
trademark battle waging out in court is not something that would hold anybody's attention for 10 minutes. Although, if Kim Kardashian were to get up on stage, like decked out in body tape,
If she had the whole family with her, come on. Come on.
Well, we had that actually with the Black China lawsuit.
And it was massive.
And it was massive, exactly.
Let's move to another big pending case. This is the ongoing saga with Sylvester Stallone and his estranged wife, Jennifer Flavin. So remember, she filed these documents, and the bombshell in them when she filed for divorce, the bombshell was that he had engaged in intentional dissipation and depletion of marital assets. That's a big no-no. So that's a fraudulent thing to do to your spouse, to move assets away so that they can't access them in the divorce.
So this kinds of allegations are made all the time, especially when you have big money at stake. But it happens all the time. We just don't hear about it as much in lots of divorces, which is the couple will know they're in trouble. One party will know that they're on the way out of the relationship. They're about to file for divorce. They know the other party's going to file for divorce. So they take some of the marital assets. They take some jewelry. They take some money out of the bank account. They charge a ton of money to the credit cards, and they take the assets and they move them basically out of the our account into the me account or into the back shed that you don't know about account.
It's one of the oldest tricks in the book, though. So courts are aware of this move, and there's ways to get that money back into the estate.
So then it goes in the court. Without these assets, the estate is smaller. When you split it in half, the spouse who didn't engage in this got less, and the spouse that did engage in it gets more. That was the allegation against Sly here, but he says not so fast.
Sly says absolutely not. So his response is, I did nothing of the sort, and this is what you would expect. I mean, it's not criminal, but it is a big no-no.
It can be criminal,
It can be criminal to make a fraudulent asset, a fraudulent transfer of that nature, but he is absolutely getting out ahead of this and saying, look, I didn't deplete any marital assets. We obviously have a ton. They got married back in 1997. Jennifer Flavin was a big model. Sly Stallone in 1997 was one of the biggest movie stars in history already. The 80s had already passed. So there is going to be some
He had nine-figure wealth at that point.
Correct.
Presumably there's a prenup in place that protected at least some of those assets. We have to think.
We'll have to see, right? But there are separate property that Sly is going to claim. I had all this money in the 80s, and if you're looking for the Rocky residuals, well, those go to me anyway because they came from before we were married. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. But in a marriage of that length, Jason, they're going to see some intermingling, right? Like commingling is a big problem. That just means when your assets from your prior life, your single life, mix with your marital assets, they become marital assets.
Yeah, and one of the big places you often see that is in real property. And here we have an enormous Palm Beach estate that's worth, I don't know,
massive amount.
Millions.
They moved there during the pandemic. It's huge.
Right. It's huge. It's got Rocky statues outside. Is that
beautiful.
house?
Yeah, not garish at all.
Right. But she asked the court for asked him and the court for exclusive use of that Palm Beach house. He said, no effing way. I'm not giving you that. Obviously, that house means a lot to them. And
I imagine there's a bunch of reminders of Sylvester Stallone around that house. To your point, there's Rocky memorabilia, there's statues. I bet she'd probably pull those up.
Right. But, this often happens that people will fight over the house. Neither party wants to give an inch. So ultimately, right, courts can just force the sale of these houses and you split the proceeds.
Yeah, they sort of have to. I mean, Harvey brought up the movie The War of the Roses. We were talking about it earlier, where you draw like a chalk line and then the warring parties live on either side of the house. That's very infrequent because it's impractical. So they'll probably just sell the house if they can't agree on who's going to live there and split the proceeds.
What do you think about my thing, though? If you split the house in half, you and your wife split your vitriolic divorce, you split the house in half, do you bring your bed right to the end of the line, have sex with other people right next to the line?
I mean, it's an assumption that I'm able to bring home people who are willing to have sex with me, but if all those things line up...
In view of your ex-wife?
If the stars align, yes. Although I think the turnabout would be unpleasant for me.
Yeah. Much happier note, right?
Yes.
Serena Williams. Well, I
don't know about happier note. Bittersweet.
Bittersweet note. Well, I mean, everybody gets older and everybody eventually retires. She's, I believe, 40 years old now. She's entering her last
Wants to have
tournament.
a second kid. She wrote a long article about, moving on from tennis to potentially have another child.
The greatest female tennis player of all time for certain.
Not even close.
Potentially the greatest tennis player of all time, depending on how you look at things. And maybe the greatest female athlete of all time. There's lots of people who think that she is doing her swan song here. And it's the U.S. Open in New York. And she's in her last tournament. The next match she loses will be her last, or maybe she'll win the whole tournament and she will not lose a match to
Go
end her
out like
career.
Michael Jordan, although Jordan came back and
he
had
lost.
an ignominious sort of losing streak with the Wizards, but that's the way to go
John,
out. Very
John
few.
Elway.
John Elway did
retired
it.
after Super Bowl.
Brady might do it.
Yes,
He had
right.
a chance to do it, but
he
came back. So
squandered
we'll
it.
see.
Right. So Serena Williams, she is in Serena Williams style. Her grand style is going out with a splash. Right. She has diamond encrusted sneakers that she's playing in. Seems somewhat impractical.
Yes.
Right.
These don't look like winner's sneakers to me. They look like farewell tour sneakers.
If you're one of those diamonds is going to pop off, and if
for
you're
sure.
a ball boy, do you like when you're going to scoop the ball? Do you just grab it in your hand and pocket it?
And they have been described as diamonds, right? Not Swarovski, not like crystal.
No, they're
crystals.
diamonds.
These are diamonds in the
diamonds.
soles of her shoes, or,
Yeah.
or on the rim of the soles of her shoes. It's wild. I think if you're a ball boy, you got to like lick your finger and like try to get them because they're little. As you're getting a ball,
They can
see
be
if any
slippery
stick.
suckers. Yeah. But just as interesting as what was happening on the court, so Serena played in her first match of the tournament. She won in straight sets, 6-2, 6-2, pretty easily
But
dominated.
she's going to draw celebrities to the crowd. This
Yes.
is her farewell
Apparently,
tournament.
the
so you're gonna see
highest
everyone.
priced tickets in the history of not just the U.S. Open, potentially tennis, are going to be sold at this tournament, depending on how long she goes. And in the stands, celebrities were turning out. Two of the biggest were Bill Clinton, two of the biggest, at least 1990s celebrities.
And one
right?
of the funniest pairings I think you could have.
Yes. Bill Clinton and Dr. Ruth Westheimer. For those of you too young to remember, Dr. Ruth Westheimer was a phenomenon in the 1980s and 90s. She was a sex therapist, this Holocaust survivor, this 4'8" tiny
Yes.
little person.
She would go on the talk show circuit,
yes.
Arsenio Hall, shows like that, and she's this tiny woman with this thick German accent, and she would talk about sex, and it was
Yes.
very entertaining. I'm trying to describe the
Well,
magic
it was
of
in a
Dr.
day
Ruth, but it
before
was a
people
big
talked
thing.
openly on television about sex, and she got on there and sort of blew the doors off of that and talked very openly about sex. And the more she went on, and the more sort of her shtick got a little older, she started pushing the limits more and more, talking about sex toys and all these things that just nobody talked about publicly. It's long before the days of Cardi B talking about
Sure.
whatever she talks about.
And it was also, she was old in the 80s.
Yes.
When we watched her, Dr. Ruth was a little old woman. That
Yes,
was what she
that was her
presented
shtick.
as.
Right.
And she is still alive. She's 94 years old. Like we said, she's a Holocaust survivor, had an amazing life. I think she was an Israeli sniper for a number of years.
Oh, that sounds like hyperbole. That can't be true.
It's
right?
on her wiki. It's wild.
that right?
She was, you do have to serve in the Israeli army. She moved to
Yeah.
Anyway,
She's
a fascinating
4'6".
life.
I mean, she could just hide behind like anything.
And she's sitting there with the most, I think, the most sexually charged sort of political figure
that we know
in
about.
modern history.
Sure.
And they're talking to each other, so people are wondering, what is Bill Clinton during the middle of the U.S. Open saying to Dr. Ruth? I don't know. The jokes just flow, but I'm not thinking of any specific. But
Yeah,
it's pretty
There's
ridiculous.
cigars, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what we're thinking about.
You think he's trading stories, asking
Yeah.
her, reliving his finest moments?
I do. I think she's like, why didn't you just wipe up the dress? It
Yes.
seems so obvious, and he doesn't have any response to it, right?
I don't think so. I think he's like, oh, look, there's a tennis match, and he tries to change the subject. I don't think it's a comfortable moment for him to be next to Dr. Ruth.
Right.
Although he seems to be enjoying himself, and she's sort of this public figure who just makes everyone feel good.
Yeah.
She's sort of beloved. She has a bit of a Betty White sort of quality to her.
So anyway, I'm rooting for Serena Williams. Derek, you told me earlier you're rooting against her. I think you said that. No, I'm just kidding. I made that.
I want to see her win. I mean, like you said, she is the goat of goats. There's no female athlete, to your point, that I would put on Mount Rushmore with her. Who's even in her class?
Not in our lifetime. So
Yeah.
some Babe Dietrichson and some
Yes.
others back in the day, and Billie Jean King, and some others who pushed barriers that Serena Williams did push.
But
barriers. I take
she
that
is
down.
as close to Michael Jordan, who is not Michael Jordan. She's just the best, and,
Yeah.
and there's sort of no dispute. And there's very few athletes
There's
who
only-
occupy that space.
I think
in the
it's
public
honestly,
conscious.
I don't even think it's Jordan, because I, for one, think LeBron's a better
Sure.
basketball player. But Wayne Gretzky is the only other
Oh, yeah, there you
person
go,
who
Wayne.
is declared the greatest, and nobody really stands up and suggests otherwise.
Yeah, so this will be great. Other people in the crowd. There was a Mike Tyson spotting in the crowd, and he looked. Do you say 3 sheets to the wind when you're very high? I mean, he's publicly very much part of marijuana culture. I think he sells
his eyes are bright red,
cookies.
leaking, and barely open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think he was fully present for the U.S. Open, although
Right.
he had
It's an
great seats that were very expensive.
Expensive ticket to get away if you're going to be completely stoned.
Anyway, Serena did win, and I want to put one more note on this. Serena won 6-3, 6-3, which is a pretty dominant performance.
Yes.
She has not been at her apex throughout, but I would not put it past Serena to have one last push where you see the dominance again. Look, the women's game is very fast. People caught up to the style of Serena Williams. When she first started, she was such a specimen that she was just rolling over the competition. She's now much older. The competition is much, much better at a younger age. I'm not sure she'll be able to win the championship, but I think she might have an extended run. What do you think? If you were prognosticating, because this was a dominant performance.
I love her, and I'm hesitant to say anything that's not entirely positive, but she is not just the same tennis player. She doesn't train nearly as hard by her own admission as she used to train. The competition is stacked.
Yeah,
I mean,
Raducanu, all those people.
She's facing the 80th player in the world that she beat 6-3, 6-3. Had she struggled against that person, we would have had real problems.
Some people will be in awe of her, and there will be nerves on the other side of the court that I don't think she's facing necessarily.
Which you always have at the U.S. Open when you play an American, but never more so than in this case. You will have an entire audience that is dying for her on every single point and the whole thing. By the way, just to finish this up, I distinctly recall in the early 90s, 91, 92, Jimmy Connors was by that point a tennis legend, American tennis legend, went to the U.S. Open, had not been relevant in a number of years. By that point, probably in his late 30s, maybe even 40, and came out of nowhere. He had not won a tournament in years, came out of nowhere and had a magical run all the way to the semifinals. And I remember in the semifinals, I believe, he was facing Jim Courier, an up-and-coming American star.
The redhead.
And people were booing Jim Courier at every point that he won, which was really unfair. Courier ended up winning and I think losing the title, but nevertheless.
Yes. It'll be fascinating to watch. And I think we'll see more and more celebrities in the stands as it goes on. But let's finish up with kind of a fun story. The Monkees. You know the band, the Monkees?
I know the band, the Monkees.
Okay. So
hey, we're the Monkees.
Hey, we're the Monkees. They were a 60s band, sort of a copycat of Beatles mania. Everyone was saying, we need to create these 4-piece bands. And they had a television show. This was sort of the American version of the Beatles.
Yes.
They had the mop cuts and everything.
3 songs that I know about. Hey, we're the Monkees, Daydream Believer, and Last Train to Clarksville.
That's right. Well, the last one is interesting because the last one, the FBI at the time was led by J. Edgar Hoover. You know J. Edgar Hoover.
Yes.
Obviously, he surveilled a lot of people, Martin Luther King, anyone who he thought had leftist intentions. J. Edgar Hoover wanted to surveil you. Well, the Monkees, being a rock band of sorts, although they didn't play their own instruments, they were sort of a television rock band, but they were a rock band. There's a file on them, and about a decade ago, this file came out where an FBI informant said, hey, I went to a concert. They were flashing subliminal messages through their songs with pictures of Berkeley and other sort of anti-war sentiment images on the screen, and they're indoctrinating our youth.
Right.
And so Mickey Dolenz, the last surviving member of the Monkees, all the Monkees have passed away, now has filed a document asking the FBI to release the entire file because he's tried to get them under a Freedom of Information Act. They didn't release all of them, so now he filed a lawsuit saying, you have to release this file. What he's going to get about it, I don't know. I think there's a point of pride with some, rock musicians to say, hey, look, J. Edgar was looking at me. I remember Paul Newman was on Nixon's enemies list, and he loved it. It was great.
Yeah.
So I think I don't think he wants to do much with it, but he wants to see what were they looking at.
What's interesting, a couple things are interesting. Number one, why aren't we just releasing all of this stuff, right?
Agreed.
It was misguided in the first place. J. Edgar Hoover was an overreaching FBI head of the FBI.
Doesn't have many defenders.
It doesn't have many defenders. At the time, we were at the height of the Vietnam conflict. There was a huge crackdown by the Nixon administration and others against the hippies, the revolutionaries,
counterculture,
the whole thing. We kept these files on these people for no apparent reason. Some people need files kept against them. Sure. They're going to be violent. Why not release all this stuff? We should see what the government was up to. We have a right to see what the government was up to.
Yeah, this is a public agency that was conducting investigations that are now no longer relevant. Obviously, don't release them at the time because there's domestic and national security and so forth. But that's certainly not relevant now. Mickey Dolenz is in his late 70s. They should release these files. I see no reason that we shouldn't have access to what the head of the FBI was doing at the time.
Right.
I see no reason.
And especially if Mickey Dolenz, the subject of it, is willing to say, I don't mind that this comes out. Let it out, right?
That's right. I think we'll see it. We'll see it because this is, it's not a very long lawsuit. There doesn't seem to be much of a battle over it. Maybe it's just a box you have to check. And I think we'll probably see this. And it may be fascinating, actually, because the Monkees weren't like a sort of rabble-rouser type of band. So a lot of people think this is kind of funny.
It could be a really interesting lens into the entire effort to suppress the sort of leading musicians of the day and their part in the countercultural. I'm sure the Beatles have an enormous file on them, the Stones and others the Stones especially, because they just came to this country and just committed every possible illegal act for decades.
It would make more sense with the Stones. Every Martin Scorsese movie that's anti-war in any sense includes Rolling Stones music. They were counterculture. The Monkees were sort of commercial culture.
Yes.
That's why this is a little bit ridiculous.
Although I want to see them.
I want to see them as well.
All right, guys. Thanks very much. Check us out wherever you get your podcast. Later.
Thanks.